Your Netflix queue has 300 unwatched shows. Stranger Things Season 5 just dropped. Everyone's talking about the new thriller series. But you're watching Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones for the 5th time, Harry Potter for the 20th. And when someone asks why you don't watch something new, you can't really explain it. But neuroscience can. Here's what's wild. While some people chase every new release like it's oxygen, there's this massive group who would rather rewatch the same content on loop. And psychology reveals it's not about laziness or lack of curiosity. Their brains are actually processing comfort and safety differently than everyone else's. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will completely reframe every time someone judged you for rewatching the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the 10th time. Let's start with something fascinating. Your brain on a rewatch isn't bored, it's relieved. When you watch something new, your prefrontal cortex is working overtime. It's tracking characters, predicting plot points, processing new information, making sense of unfamiliar worlds. That takes energy, real cognitive energy. But when you rewatch, that effort disappears. Your brain already knows the story. It can finally relax. Psychologist Pamela Rutledge explains this through the mere exposure effect. The more familiar something is, the more your brain likes it. Not despite knowing what happens, but because you know what happens. When Walter White has his iconic confrontation, you're not surprised, but you still get chills. Why? Because your brain isn't processing new information, it's experiencing pure emotion without the cognitive load. That's not laziness, that's efficiency. Here's where it gets deeper. Research from the University of Chicago shows that people who rewatch content score higher on a trait called need for cognitive closure. These are people whose brains crave certainty. Unpredictability feels threatening. Open-ended stories feel exhausting. When life gets chaotic, when work is stressful, when relationships are unstable, these people don't want more uncertainty from their entertainment. They want the opposite. They want to know the characters they love end up okay. They want to know the hero saves the day. They want to know the couple figures it out. Rewatching isn't avoidance, it's emotional regulation. They're using familiar stories as psychological anchors in an unpredictable world. But here's what nobody talks about. There's actually a neurochemical reason some people rewatch obsessively. Studies on dopamine and anticipation show something counterintuitive. You'd think knowing what happens would kill the dopamine hit, but it doesn't. When you rewatch a favorite scene, your brain releases dopamine not from surprise, but from anticipation. You know the joke is coming. You know the twist is about to drop. And that anticipation creates a dopamine loop that's actually more satisfying than surprise. It's why you smile before your favorite line happens for the 100th time. Your brain is getting high on predictable pleasure. And some people's dopamine systems are wired to prefer that over the uncertainty of new content. Here's a real example. A woman who's watched Pride and Prejudice 47 times, not because she forgot the plot, but because she first watched it while recovering from surgery in 2015. Her brain encoded that movie with feelings of safety and healing. Now, whenever life gets overwhelming, her brain craves that same safety. The movie isn't just entertainment anymore. It's a neural pathway to calm. Psychologists call this contextual conditioning. Her brain associated that content with survival and comfort during a vulnerable time. This is why people rewatch shows from their childhood obsessively. It's not nostalgia, it's neurological. Their brain learned that this content equals safety, and when adult life feels threatening, their brain reaches for that old safety blanket. Here's the part that sounds contradictory. People who rewatch actually notice more than people who don't. Research shows that rewatching allows for deeper character analysis. When you're not stressed about plot, you notice micro-expressions, subtext, character motivations you missed before. Think about Game of Thrones. First watch, you're trying to remember who's related to who. Third watch, you're catching every political maneuver, every piece of foreshadowing, every subtle glance. You're not watching the same show, you're watching a completely different layer of it. This is why film students and writers rewatch obsessively. They're studying craft. Every rewatch reveals new techniques, new details, new genius you couldn't catch when you were busy processing plot. But let's be honest about something else. Some people rewatch because making decisions is exhausting. Choice paralysis is real. When you have 10,000 options, your brain freezes. What if you pick wrong? What if you waste 2 hours on something terrible? Psychologist Barry Schwartz researched this extensively in his work on the paradox of choice. More options don't increase satisfaction, they increase anxiety. So people default to what they know. It's not that they don't want new content, it's that the cost of choosing wrong feels too high. They'd rather have guaranteed enjoyment than risk disappointment. When Netflix asks if they're still watching, They click yes, because that's one less decision their exhausted brain has to make. Here's what's really interesting. The personality trait openness to experience predicts whether you rewatch or not. People high in openness crave novelty. They need new stimuli, new stories, new worlds. Their brain gets restless with repetition. People low in openness prefer familiarity. They find comfort in known patterns. They're not closed-minded. They're just wired to find safety in repetition rather than stimulation in novelty. Neither is better. They're just different operating systems. And culture plays a role too. Western culture worships novelty. New is better, old is boring. But many Eastern cultures value repetition, ritual, returning to the same stories. They understand something the West forgets. Depth comes from repetition, not from constant novelty. Let's talk about something most people won't mention. Trauma survivors often rewatch compulsively, and there's a psychological reason. When you've experienced unpredictability in a dangerous way, when your safety was violated, when you couldn't control your environment, your brain becomes hypervigilant to surprise. New content means new surprises, and surprises, even good ones, can trigger that old threat response. But rewatching, complete control. No unexpected moments they didn't see coming. No plot twists that spike their nervous system. Just safe, predictable comfort. For them, rewatching isn't entertainment, it's therapy. And judging them for it misses the entire point of what their brain is trying to do. Here's the part that's going to change how you see rewatchers forever. Research from psychologist Crystal Russell shows that people form parasocial relationships with characters. These aren't imaginary friends, they're real emotional bonds your brain doesn't distinguish from actual relationships. When someone rewatches Friends, they're not watching a show, they're spending time with people their brain genuinely misses. When they rewatch Breaking Bad, they're reconnecting with characters like checking in on people they care about. This isn't pathetic, it's human. Your brain bonds with fictional characters using the same neural pathways it uses for real relationships. And some people's brains form stronger parasocial bonds than others. So what does all this mean? If you're a rewatcher, you're not stuck, you're not boring, you're not lacking growth. You're just someone whose brain finds value in depth over breadth, in emotional safety over constant stimulation. There's something quietly radical about that. In a culture that constantly screams consume more, watch more, experience more, rewatchers are saying no. I'm going deeper with what I already love. They're not keeping up with every trend. They're not chasing every new release. They're cultivating a relationship with stories that genuinely matter to them. And there's real wisdom in that. The next time someone asks you why you're rewatching The Lord of the Rings again, you can tell them this. Your brain isn't avoiding new experiences. It's seeking mastery. It's choosing depth. It's prioritizing emotional regulation over cultural pressure to always consume something new. You're not stuck in the past. You're someone who knows what brings you peace, and in a world that never stops moving, that's not weakness, that's self-awareness. So here's my question for you. What's your comfort rewatch? The show or movie you've seen so many times you can quote it in your sleep. Drop it in the comments, because someone else probably has that same comfort anchor. And if this made you realize your rewatching habit isn't weird, it's actually psychological sophistication, subscribe, because every week we break down why the things you thought were flaws are actually features of how your unique brain works. Remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation for rewatching your favorite show for the 12th time. You're not stuck, you're just someone who found something worth returning to. And that's beautiful.